Hi, friend. Welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Heather, and I've been podcasting since 2009 with my show, making it the original Tudor History Podcast. This channel is where I put all of my episodes from all of my shows, as well as tons and tons of extra content like this video right here. Today, we are going to talk about Henry VIII's most brutal and unjust executions. I'm still thinking about it because of having watched Wolf Hall and thinking how unjust it was that Cromwell was executed and everything like that. And I wanted to put together a list of some other super unjust executions where Henry was just a monster acting like monsters do. He was just a monster monstering. So let's get into it. But before we do, if you would like to see more Tudor history in your YouTube feed, why don't you go ahead and hit subscribe to this channel so you never miss a video that we put out? All right, so Henry, of course, is remembered mostly for his 6 wives and his monumental religious upheavals, but there is a much darker truth behind all of that. His rule was marked by a series of executions that, even in a time of ruthless justice, still shocked his contemporaries. These were not always necessary acts of state. Many were motivated by paranoia, revenge, or sheer cruelty. Today, we will explore some of Henry VIII's most inexcusable executions, tracing a path from the Duke of Buckingham's fall to the bloody purge of the Pole family. These stories show not just the brutal methods of Tudor justice, but also the insecurities of a king willing to destroy anyone, friends, family, or even loyal servants who posed even the slightest, tiniest threat to his authority. Every time I say the word authority, I hear Cartman on South Park saying, "Respect my authority." Anyway, somebody should make a South Park where Cartman's Henry VIII, because I think they are very similar characters, aren't they? That's a tangent. All right, let's start with Edward Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, 1521. The first major execution in Henry VIII's reign was Edward Stafford, Duke of Buckingham. Stafford was one of the highest-ranking nobles in England, with a lineage that traced directly back to Edward III. His royal blood, combined with his vast wealth and influence, made him a towering figure at court, and, of course, ultimately a target. By 1521, Henry had been king for over a decade, and his position seemed secure, but there still were some whispers of discontent among the nobility. Buckingham's downfall began with vague accusations of treason, including claims that he had consulted astrologers about Henry's death and harbored ambitions for the throne for himself. These charges were flimsy at best, relying heavily on rumors and on the testimony of those who were eager to curry favor with the king. At his trial, Buckingham protested his innocence, but the outcome was never going to be in doubt. He was found guilty of treason. He was executed on Tower Hill. The real reason for his death, though, was likely his perceived threat to Henry's authority. I can't do Cartman voice. Henry saw him as a threat. As a powerful noble with a legitimate claim to the throne, he symbolized everything Henry feared: rivals who could challenge his dynasty. Buckingham's execution sent a clear message to the nobility: even the loftiest of titles could not protect you from Henry's anger. For Stafford, his only real crime was probably being too powerful and too closely related to the crown. 15 years later, Henry turned his attention to another group of dissenters. This time, it wasn't about noble bloodlines, but spiritual authority. Thomas More and John Fisher were among the most respected men in England, both celebrated for their intellect and their piety. Yet their refusal to endorse Henry's break with the Catholic Church and his self-appointment as the supreme head of the Church of England sealed their fates. Thomas More was a former friend of the king. They were very, very close friends. He knew Henry since he was a child, and he'd been his Lord Chancellor, and he had been an early supporter of Henry's reforms. But when Henry sought to divorce Catherine of Aragon and marry Anne Boleyn, More could not reconcile these actions with his faith. Rather than openly opposing Henry, More chose silence, refusing to take the oath of supremacy that acknowledged Henry's authority over the church. John Fisher, the Bishop of Rochester, was even more vocal in his opposition. A steadfast ally of Catherine of Aragon, he denounced Henry's marriage to Anne and defended the Pope. His defiance made him a hero to Catholics, but an enemy of the crown. Both men were accused of, you guessed it, treason. Their trials were just show trials. They were designed to justify the inevitable executions. Fisher was frail. He was elderly. He was executed first. Moore followed shortly after, walking to the scaffold with a calm dignity that inspired those who witnessed it. His final words were, I die the king's good servant, but God's first. And that became a lasting symbol of his principles. These executions shocked Europe. Moore and Fisher were not rebellious conspirators or foreign agents. They were men of conscience, guilty only of staying true to their beliefs. Their deaths were a turning point, demonstrating that Henry would tolerate no dissent, not even silent resistance. By the late 1530s, Henry's paranoia had grown, fueled by rebellion and opposition to his religious reforms. Few families felt the brunt of his anger more than the Poles, one of the last surviving Plantagenet families. Margaret Pole was the Countess of Salisbury in her own right. She was the daughter of George, Duke of Clarence, and a niece of Edward IV, so she was a cousin of sorts to Henry VIII. Her family's royal lineage made her a natural focal point for those who opposed Henry's rule. But it was her son, Reginald Pole, who truly provoked Henry's ire. Reginald was a cardinal in the Catholic Church. He'd written scathing attacks on Henry's divorce and break with Rome, aligning himself with the Pope against his king. Margaret and her family were caught up in what became known as the Exeter Conspiracy, a supposed plot to overthrow Henry and restore the Catholic rule. Her oldest son, Henry Pul, Lord Montague, was arrested alongside Henry Courtney, Marquess of Exeter, and others. Montague was executed along with many other supposed conspirators. Margaret herself had initially been spared. She was in her 60s at this point, and she was the niece of Edward IV. She had royal blood. Her reprieve, though, ended in 1541. She'd been imprisoned in the Tower of London for over 2 years. She was finally condemned to death without a trial. On the 27th of May, 1541, the 67-year-old countess was led to the scaffold on Tower Hill. What followed was one of the most brutal and botched executions in Tudor history. Margaret initially refused to kneel, forcing the inexperienced executioner to try to hack at her neck and shoulders until she was dead. It did not go well. Her death was not about justice. It was clearly an act of vengeance. Henry couldn't get Reginald because Reginald was safe on the continent, and so he went after Reginald's family. She was punished not for her own actions, but for the words of her son and the blood in her veins. Her execution marked the end of an era, the final destruction of the Plantagenet line, and it remains one of the most horrifying examples of Henry's cruelty. As Margaret Pole and her family faced destruction, another group of nobles became entangled in Henry's web of paranoia. The so-called Exeter Conspiracy swept up several prominent figures, including, like we just mentioned, Henry Courtney, the Marquess of Exeter, Sir Edward Neville, and Nicholas Carew. While the evidence against them was super thin, their connection to the Poles and their status as powerful figures made them convenient targets for Henry's relentless pursuit of control. Henry Courtney, like Margaret Pole, was of royal blood. He was a grandson of Edward IV's sister, so that made him a potential figurehead for any rebellion. He had long been a trusted ally of Henry VIII, serving as a member of the King's Privy Council and even dining regularly with the royal family. But in 1538, Courtney was accused of conspiring with Reginald Pole and fomenting rebellion against the crown. Sir Edward Neville and Nicholas Carew were implicated in the same conspiracy. Neville was a courtier and a member of the powerful Neville family, and he was accused primarily because of his close ties to the Poles. Carew was a former master of the horse and a longtime friend of Henry, and he fell afoul of factional politics at court. Their trials were swift and brutal. Courtney and Neville were beheaded on Tower Hill, while Carew was executed at Tyburn. Their deaths sent shockwaves through the court as they demonstrated that even Henry's inner circle could fall from grace with alarming speed. The Exeter Conspiracy was another turning point in Henry's reign. By eliminating the Courtneys, Nevilles, and the Poles, he effectively destroyed the last vestiges of Plantagenet opposition. These executions were less about any actual treason, more about ensuring that no one, no matter how loyal or how innocent, could challenge his authority. So Henry's reign is often remembered for these larger-than-life dramas: 6 wives, monumental break with the Catholic Church, dazzling court filled with intrigue. But there was a very dark reality behind them, a king who ruled through fear, eliminating anyone who threatened his vision of absolute control. The executions of Stafford, Thomas More, John Fisher, Margaret Pole, the victims of the Exeter Conspiracy, reveal the human cost of Henry's paranoia. They weren't enemies defeated in battle or foreign spies caught in the act. They were friends, they were family members, and loyal servants, many of whom fell victim to little more than the king's suspicions. Was all of this just a necessary part of England's transformation, or was he a tyrant consumed by his own fears and paranoia? That is the question. I have my answer in my head. What do you think? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear what you think. All right, friend. If you made it this far in the video and you enjoyed it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. It helps to feed that algorithm and get our content to more people. Spread the Tudor love. Also, I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out content like this almost every day. If you want to keep binging Tudor content, here is a video on Margaret Pole. And here's one that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, you are truly loved. I'm so glad I shared the planet with you. Don't forget to drink your water. I'll be back soon. Have a great day.